On June 24, 1967, 6 young men prepared to explore a dangerous cave system in Yorkshire, England. All were experienced cavers, used to tight passages and long underground stretches. Among them was Michael Ryan, a 17-year-old boy passionate about adventure and geology. The cave chosen that day was Mosdale Caverns. Within the caving community, it was known as one of the most treacherous caves in the country. The entrance was discreet, just a narrow crack between rocks near Mosdale Scar, but inside, it turned into a maze of low tunnels, tight curves, and crawl-only passages. That morning, the weather was cloudy but calm. No one could have imagined what was about to unfold. With ropes, flashlights, helmets, and backpacks, the group began their descent. The plan was to explore one of the narrowest sections, the far marathon crawl. It was so tight they could barely turn their heads inside. The team moved in single file, slowly pushing forward inch by inch. Outside, the weather suddenly changed. Heavy rain hit the area earlier than expected. The limestone terrain quickly absorbed the rainwater, and that water started flowing directly into the cave. Deep below, the air grew damp and heavy. The floor became slick. Small trickles of water turned into rushing streams. Then came the sound, the deafening roar of floodwater echoing through the cave. They realized what was happening, but it was already too late. The cave was flooding. There was no time to turn back. The path they had come through was already partially submerged. They tried to retreat, but it was impossible. Water surged violently through the tunnels. They were trapped in the narrowest part of the cave with no way out. Above ground, no one realized the group was missing for the first few hours, but by nightfall, concern set in. Rescue teams were called. Experienced volunteers rushed to the entrance of Mosdale Caverns. It was pouring rain. Visibility was terrible. The cave entrance already showed signs of flooding, but the rescuers went in anyway. They worked in shifts, crawling through the same tunnels the boys had crossed. The first day passed with no sign of the group. Then came the second. The rescuers advanced a bit further, but water was still flowing fast, and many areas remained flooded. It was too dangerous to continue. They had to retreat once again. Only on the third day did the water levels begin to drop. The rescuers resumed the journey, crawling through tight cracks and squeezing through sharp, wet rock until they finally reached the far marathon crawl. What they found was devastating. Michael Ryan was still wearing his helmet. The headlamp attached to it no longer worked. All 6 boys were dead. Their bodies lay side by side, trapped in the tunnel. They were just a few meters away from a slightly higher area, one that might have saved them, but they hadn't reached it. Removing the bodies was extremely dangerous. The area was too unstable, too narrow. After discussions with the families, a painful decision was made. The bodies would remain inside the cave. The entrance was sealed with concrete. Outside, a plaque was placed in memory of the 6 young men. It bears their names: Michael Ryan, Jeffrey Workman, John Ogden, David Adamson, Terry Watson, and Colin Vickers. The tragedy shook the entire British caving community. It was considered the worst cave disaster in British history and led to permanent changes in safety protocols. From that point on, checking the weather forecast became a mandatory rule before any underground exploration. Today, Mosdale Caverns is seen as a tomb. No one enters anymore. The James Mitchell Incident, 1965. On February 13, 1965, James G. Mitchell, 23 years old, set out with 2 friends in search of adventure. He was passionate about caves. That day was freezing. Snow was falling. Together with his 2 companions, he headed into the Mannheim Forest. Their destination, a nearly unknown cave recently discovered by local teachers. They called it Schroeder's Pants Cave, a strange name for such a treacherous place. Upon arriving, they began preparing for the descent. Mitchell went first. He tied the rope to a secure anchor point, fastened the harness to his body, and began descending. Inside, the space narrowed quickly. It was dark, wet, and freezing cold. The main shaft dropped over 20 meters. In the middle of the shaft, there was a small underground waterfall, cold water flowing constantly. James wanted to examine a side opening, but something went wrong. The rope twisted. His body shifted. James called for help. His friends shouted his name. He answered, but weakly. They tried pulling him back up, but he wouldn't move. The rope was caught at a bad angle. Time passed. The water kept pouring down onto his chest, his face, chilling his bones, freezing his skin. He was stuck. His arm tangled, his torso pressed against the rock wall. The waterfall poured directly onto him, icy, relentless. His body temperature began to drop. James started shivering uncontrollably. Then his voice grew faint until it stopped completely. His friends ran for help. Within hours, experienced cavers, firefighters, and military personnel arrived. It was a complex rescue. The rescuers began descending into the cave. They tried to warm him up, tried to adjust the rope, tried to reposition him, but James's body no longer responded. The rescue was deemed impossible under those conditions. The cave was too unstable. The shaft was already starting to collapse. Removing James would have put other lives at risk. The rescuers returned to the surface and explained the delicate situation to his friends. In the end, a painful decision was made. The cave would be sealed permanently with stones. James Mitchell was declared dead. His body remained inside the cave for over 40 years. Only in 2006, with modern technology and specialized recovery teams, were James's remains finally retrieved. His brother Bill closely followed the process and was finally able to bury him with dignity. Today, Schroeder's Pants Cave is avoided by everyone. It's remembered as a dark, icy trap, and James's death still stands as a brutal reminder of the dangers that lie beneath the surface. A body suspended, trapped in cold water, with no way out and no warmth. The Plura Cave Incident 2014. In February 2014, the temperature in northern Norway was below freezing. The lakes were covered in ice, and the wind cut across the face like a blade. Still, 5 experienced divers from Finland were preparing for a mission that to many seemed impossible: to fully traverse Plura Cave, one of the most dangerous submerged cave systems in Europe. The team consisted of Patrick Granqvist, Vesa Rantanen, Kai Kankanen, Jari Uusitalo, and Jari Huotarinen. All were highly trained, well-equipped, and familiar with cave diving. Each diver carried 7 compressed air cylinders, thermal diving suits, and followed guidelines, nylon threads fixed to the cave walls to mark the return path. Their goal was to cross 2.3 kilometers of Plura Cave, navigating deep underwater through narrow fissures, tight turns, and dark chambers, until they reached the exit point on the other side, in the Steinugla-Flaget system. To minimize risk, they split into 2 groups. Granqvist and Huotarinen entered first. The other 3 would follow about an hour later. They entered the icy waters on February 6, 2014, around 1 o'clock p.m. The first part of the dive went according to plan. Everything was controlled. Movements were synchronized. Safety protocols were strictly followed. Plura Cave, while dangerous, was familiar territory, but the final stretch held a silent trap. In the last section, Huotarinen began navigating a narrow fissure, an elbow-shaped corridor with tight angles and reduced height, the kind of place where any misalignment could be fatal. Suddenly, something went wrong. Granqvist, ahead, noticed Huotarinen was no longer behind him. Realizing something was wrong, he turned back to help, but it was nearly impossible. The passage was so tight that water pressure pushed against him. The air tanks on his back hit the rock walls. Movement was lost by the second. Huotarinen began swallowing water. He slowly lost consciousness. Knowing he couldn't help, and realizing he was now in danger too, Granqvist made a decision. He kept moving forward, completing the route alone. That decision saved his life. About an hour later, the second group entered: Rantanen, Uusitalo, and Kankanen. Rantanen, now in the same deadly passage, came across Huotarinen's unresponsive body. He had to make a choice: turn back or continue. He chose to push forward, completing the crossing. Uusitalo, right behind him, saw his friend and panicked. Disoriented and unable to escape the narrow corridor, he also died. The 5th diver, Kankanen, upon seeing Uusitalo's body, turned back. He did not complete the crossing. He returned to the starting point alone. Later, after recovering on the surface, Kankanen and Rantanen contacted emergency services. Norwegian police divers assessed the situation. They concluded that recovering the bodies would be too dangerous, due to depth, pressure, and the complexity of the system. The official decision was to seal the cave. The bodies would remain inside. But Kankanen and Rantanen refused to accept it. They planned their own recovery mission, without government permission. 2 months and 20 days later, they returned to Plura Cave. Every movement was calculated. The plan was dangerous, reckless to some, but they didn't care. These were their brothers. After more than 10 hours underwater, both bodies, Uusitalo and Huotarinen, were recovered and brought to the surface. They were buried with national mourning in Finland. The media around the world called it an act of extreme courage, but the divers rejected the label of heroes. In an interview, Kai Kankanen said, "I didn't go there for glory. I went there out of respect. They were our brothers, and you don't leave a brother behind." It became a story of bravery, loyalty, and two men who returned to hell to bring the others home.